Κυρίες και κύριοι,
Ladies and gentlemen, Gennadius Library of the American School of Classical Studies of Athens and Schwarz Foundation welcome you to the public discussion with the title, Who is Planning Athens? The discussion will start in a few minutes. Please deactivate your mobile phones. We'd like to remind you that the use of mask is compulsory throughout the event until you exit the venue. After the end of the event, we will kindly ask you to remain seated until you are given instructions on how to leave the building. Thank you very much.
gentlemen, welcome to the public debate, Who is Planning Athens, co-organized by the Gennadius Library of the American School of Classical Studies at Athens and the Schwarz Foundation. The event will start in a few minutes. You are kindly requested to switch off your mobile phones and be reminded to wear your mask at all times. Please remain seated after the end of the event and wait for the staff's instructions to exit. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Georgopoulou, Director of Gennadius Library, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you today to Kotzen Hall and to Gennadius Library, of course, for a special event, somewhat different to the academic events organized by the American School. This opening session of the Athens Meeting 2022, entitled Who is Planning Athens? The fact that this is a special event is due to the fact that the topic of our debate today is not an historic overview of our city. It is not a historical overview of our city, but a debate of substance that will bring to the foreground hot issues that concern us all. Issues pertaining to architecture, urban planning, environment that seem to swallow the neighborhoods of Athens, to change it speedily without us even realizing it. Is this happening without us realizing it? Do we talk about a modern Athens with a reference point being the Charter of Athens by Le Corbusier, an Athens that is nostalgic, seen through the eyes of Piccioni and the generation of the 30s, a big city that scares us, a city where the car and the motorbikes prevail in all spaces, an Athens which is similar to Dubai. Following the initiative by the Schwarz Foundation, we are starting here today in Gennadius Library a round of discussions about Athens, which will be a starting point for a dialogue with experts on issues pertaining to cities. It is a great pleasure to welcome and to salute the president of the Schwarz Foundation, Ms. Chona Xanthopoulou, and I would like to wish all the success to all her initiatives. The core of our debate is, of course, Athens as a design canvas, as a residential network, as a place of historic memory. But the purpose is to start a discussion that will allow us to think even beyond the localistic borders that we are used to think, and to perceive Athens in a different way, from a different perspective, because our daily life, our problems, our pleasures, the joy that we get from the light, the climate, the landscape, the rich social life, which will come again soon, I hope, all these are issues that concern not only us, the Athenians, but concern people around the world, because these discussions have to do with what character we want to attribute to our city. As a historian, I can never disregard the different layers of civilization, culture, and historic memory that are abound in Athens, but also as a citizen of this modern city, I can understand the need for changes that may potentially change the tissue and the network of the city. Today's discussion and the following meetings that will allow different experts to meet in order to discuss about the great importance that Athens of 2022 has for the idea of the city itself, internationally speaking and generally speaking. So I would like to say to Mr. Andreas Giacumacatos and to all the participants to that I hope that they have a constructive exchange of views that will make us partakers of a rich and meaningful dialogue for the immediate and distant future of our city.
Γεια σας. Καλησπέρα σε όλους και τους αγαπητούς φίλους και φίλοι.
Good afternoon. I would like to welcome all the friends here today in the Gennadius library. The microphone is not working.
Καλά. Υπάρχει και άλλη λύση.
There is always a way. Okay, my name is Andreas Giacumacatos, and I would like to welcome all of you, all our friends here today. I can see many familiar faces in the audience. I can see many colleagues. I would like to welcome all of you to this event that will focus on Athens, and I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Schwarz Foundation and, of course, of the Gennadius Library. As was previously mentioned by Ms. Georgopoulou. Tonight's event is the first in a series of events. It is not a conference. It is not exactly a scientific meeting because, of course, we do have the need of the experts and the scientists. We have scientists with us today who are all distinguished and who will enlighten us along with the mayor of Athens, Mr. Bakogiannis. But it is mostly an endeavor that aims at exchanging views, an endeavor that aims at promoting discussion and debate. What we have verified in Athens, a city that has great capacities and great prospect for the future, is that this time many things are taking place in Athens, but there is very little discussion about this. The point is that this has not only to do with the information provided to the citizens, it mostly has to do with the fact that the discussion can actually reveal what is the program that lies behind what is right now taking place in Athens. The aim of this public debate and the title is Who is Planning Athens? We are going to touch upon different interventions being made in the city. So again, who is planning Athens? This means that there is someone planning it. Who is that? And which are their objective? We have been using this phrase, what is the vision that these people may have? You know, last year, we celebrated 200 years since the revolution of 1821. And when we talk about Athens, we tend to focus on the success, not only on the successes of the Athens, but mostly on the failures of Athens. And the first sign of what would happen in Athens was in 1834, summer 1834, when Efthimios Bakogiannis from Munich came. Why did he came? Because Otto asked for help from Ludwig, because the study of Schwarz met great resistance, especially by the landowners and by the land proprietors in Attica. And the Athens that was being created back then had to overcome all these problems. And the major problem was that this new city had to be built on the ruins of the ancient city. But of course, I don't want to touch upon this issue right now. Since then, and we are talking about 200 years of problems, mind you. Already in the Middle War period, the problems were so big in the Middle War period. I'm not talking about the post-1974 era. That in 1934, distinguished architects and special designers asked for an integrated management of the situation, something that was actually implemented by Metaxas immediately after 1934. It was in 1936 when Metaxas established the Ministry for the Capital. This was indicative of what was happening in Athens before the Second World War. So the debate that we will hold today has to do with that exactly. And that is, we want to understand what will happen in the coming 50 years in a city that has huge capacities and potential. If the mayor allows me to mention, Mr. Bakogiannis will visit Florence as of tomorrow in order to take part in a meeting of mayors of Mediterranean cities. It is an institution with long tradition that was first organized in 1960 following an initiative by the then Italian president. There will be distinguished guests, the Prime Minister of Italy, Pope, and many other distinguished guests. And this is very important because generally the Mediterranean region is a very important area, and every representative of the city goes there in order to share the vision that they have for their city. Because, as we all know, the Attica region is not one municipality but many, so we need to have representation there. So Athens has a great potential and a very bright future, but I would not to be here in the same venue 50 years later, not being able to talk about the mistakes that we have probably made. I repeat, I don't want to be here 50 years later and disregard the potential mistakes that we have probably made. And this type of debates like tonight's, and since the topic of this debate is mainly political, what we need to do first is see what is going on in the city and try to understand what can actually happen in the future. And this, of course, has to do with the quality of our life, because if we live well in the city, then the foreign guests will also live well. Foreigners of all origins, anyone who is visiting the city. But in order for this to happen, the city needs to be attractive. The city, as I said, has huge potential, and we need to invest in this potential. So with these thoughts, I would like to welcome all the guests. And let's start with the presentations. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, there is no sound. Mr. Giacumacatos is not using a microphone.
Ξανακατεβαίνω τώρα. Ήτανε σικαίο αυτό.
So Mr. Giacumacatos invited Mr. Georgios Lialios to take the floor. Georgios Lialios is a journalist for Kathimerini newspaper.
Δεν θεωρώ ότι είχε αυτή την αναφορά, αλλά εν πάση περιπτώσει. Λοιπόν, καλησπέρα.
Good afternoon. My name is Georgios Lialios. I work in Kathimerini newspaper for the last 20 years. Most of these years I have been focusing on spatial design issues, public works and others. I would like to make a brief presentation of how I feel about Athens, about what is going on in Athens right now. And in order to do that, I would like to touch upon two topics, the one being of a special design nature and the other of a political nature.
Άλλο κουμπί. Ωραία. Λοιπόν, από ό,τι βλέπω εδώ δεν είναι
πολεοδομικό.
From what I can see, we have different ages in the audience, but I can see very young faces as well. So let us remind you what was happening in Athens prior to the Olympic Games. Here you can see the Olympic Village. I don't think that many of you have visited this village unless you live close by, but what we don't know is that the Olympic Village is the biggest residential program that has been implemented, biggest in terms of surface and in terms of budget following the 1974 political change. So the Olympic Village, along with the other Olympic premises, were realized thanks to a legislation that was passed prior to the Olympic Games. So it was an Olympic law that was passed in 1999, which institutionalized an urban planning tool, the integrated designs for the residential development of areas, a law which actually facilitated the construction of the different facilities used in the Olympic Games. For the Olympic Village, for example, if we had to do some remarks, initially the Olympic Village would have been built in Keramikos. In Barcelona, for example, the Olympic facilities used some downgraded areas of the city with some very good results. However, we decided to build the Olympic Village in the area of Thrakomakedones. Of course, not all things were done right. Okay. Why am I saying all this? Because there are two things that we need to keep in mind. The first is that we have a special legislation, a shell, if you like, a legislative shell that has to do with the special planning of specific works. The second is that in order to justify these divergences, the public, and we're talking about many divergences, because you understand that in the Olympic period there was the construction of highways, roads, buildings, you name it. And you understand that in order for these things to be built, many divergences had to be made. Anyway, so the public explained that all these were important for the nation. It was important to hold the Olympic Games and to build all these facilities. There was a great national importance that actually proved to be not so great. But this actually helped to include in the Olympic provisions some works that had nothing to do with the Olympic Games. For example, a shopping mall, or the mall. Moreover, many of these provisions remained after the Olympic Games and are still in force. So one of these legacies was the national importance. This national importance was the excuse that was put forward in order to justify all these divergences. And this actually happened again during the last 10 years. And this actually happened because of the economic crisis. There was the excuse of the economic crisis that would justify different divergences. Since 2009, there has been a series of laws that were directly or indirectly linked to the economic crisis and to the attraction of investment. So through these, the public state put forward again the national importance, that it was important for the country to stand on its own 2 feet. And that is why there have been many urban planning and special planning laws. And we were reading back then that the main objective was to develop a new model for residential development. Now, the term new can be debated. So which are these standards? First of all, the utilization of big public spaces in the form of organized receptors, as the urban planners call them, that is, tourist villages, shopping malls, entertainment parks, all of these major developments. Gradually, the strategic planning is replaced by case-by-case planning, which is flexible. It may sound good, but it's not that good, believe me. The urban planning and the special planning has been the target of many criticism as being against development, and has been criticized for many other things. And the truth is that the urban planning has many delays and many disadvantages. But the point is that all these were put forward in order to replace an a la carte urban planning that meets the demands of a specific investment. It is actually an umbrella, an urban planning umbrella that aims at different land uses. And throughout this period, we learned different acronyms, apart from the one I mentioned earlier, the SOAP, we heard about SHASD, about different things and different acronyms, which basically are urban planning tools that have to do with specific investments. Allow me just a minute to drink some water.
Λοιπόν, παράλληλα προχώρησε.
At the same time, the urban planning and special planning reform was being implemented. Some people call these deregulation, but anyway, there were two pillars. You can see the laws here, laws 4269 and law 4467, both of which changed many things, especially for special planning. special plans in specific areas were more competitive and attractive compared to some other regional ones. And the urban plans actually were then accompanied by some special urban plans. Keep that in mind, because I will explain to you later what these are. The special urban plans are beautiful because they can modify the existing plan from a block of from a square up to the urban planning of an entire island or of a municipality or two municipalities. In other words, you may have an area that has a general urban plan, and next to it you may have a very small area that is governed by the special urban plan. And if you are subject to the special urban plan, you don't have, you are in a far greater position because you enjoy more advantages. So when the state should intervene in a regulatory way, it didn't. And I know that I'm going to touch a very delicate chord by giving you the example of Airbnb that is not regulated yet. The result of that being that the touristification of Athens has been very rapid, far more rapid than many other sectors. In the city center, all the people had to leave their houses because there was great demand from the tourists. And now these people have problems finding house because the rents have increased and houses have been reduced in the city center. So what I just said was the part pertaining to the urban planning. Keep that in mind, because these are the urban planning tools that change the urban plan for the city. They change the way that we plan and design. And now comes the second point. Who is responsible for this planning and design? In the past, we knew of the organization of Athens that was part of the Ministry of Environment. Then it was abolished. Then we had the Directorate of Environment. And this competence for the urban planning was fragmented. In other words, there were different departments of different ministries taking up an urban planning competence from the Ministry of Environment, or were giving it to the special fund for the urban planning of Athens. Recently, a new model has emerged, and that is a group of companies or foundations being able to come into play. This model emerged in 2011 to 2014. It was a program for the redevelopment of the city center. The Ministry of Environment assigned the Onassis Foundation to do all the studies, and the truth is that these studies were very well detailed and very good, but there were some basic issues, and the plan was not implemented. For some people for better, for other people for worse. The whole thing closed in 2015 by the Council of the State. Why? Because it was against the Regulatory Plan of Athens. So keep that in mind. Later, the different foundations could make some interventions. And you remember the example of the Omonia Square. We had a donation by Laskaridis Foundation and a company that is building fountains. Of course, there was a great criticism. There were architects saying that you cannot possibly do things like that. There must be design, there must be plans, there must be architectural contests. Of course, there was also the Elliniko Park issue. I don't want to touch upon this because it's not of the moment. We all know that it's being developed in a public area, and the state has shown great zeal in facilitating the investor. But if you sit down and measure how many regulations have been passed in order for this to be done, you spend a lot of time, and I don't want to do that right now. So, 2021. In 2021, 4 major projects of urban planning character were announced. Tatoi Palace, Tatoi. The Ministry of Culture was assigned to redevelop and proceed to the restoration of the area, of course, based on political criteria, because we know that the Ministry of Culture has no experience in urban planning issues, nor in other relevant sectors. Anyway, The Ministry of Culture assigned then Laskaridis Foundation to perform the sustainability study. Then 3 offices were also employed. The study was completed but was not presented. It wasn't published. Only a PowerPoint was given to the media. The Ministry of Culture never explained how they ended up to the scenario that they ended up with. Recently, the Ministry of Culture assigned once again Laskaridis Foundation to specialize the study. The agreement was never published. And the point is that this study will be financed by the Recovery and Resilience Fund. I would like to note at this point that the study for Tatoi had been performed since 2012 but had never been implemented. Here we can see the coastal zone of Athens, the Athenian Riviera. What was announced that there would be a special area for the pedestrians and for the bicyclists. Of course, the organization that undertook this responsibility has no relevant experience in that. This project will be funded by the Recovery Fund. But okay, I didn't have experience when I started working as a journalist in Kathimerini, but okay. So this project will be funded by the Recovery Fund. And in that project, the demand real estate company is also involved. And the interesting fact is that the design and the planning for the pedestrian streets in the coastal zone has been modified based on a special regulation. The Olympic Stadium, again, another major project for its renovation. The architectural study has been signed by Argyros Architectural Office. This can only be found in very small letters, whereas the Minister of Sports said that this master plan was completed thanks to this demand real estate company. The point is that in this study, okay, there is a reference to the upgrading and the redevelopment of the facilities, but there will be some other uses of the facility, and we don't know what these uses will be. I would like to remind you that in 2018, another plan had been announced, the so-called Athens Align. Many sport newspapers were promoting it since it included hotels, thematic parks, commercial uses. The particularity of that, though, was that this initiative was taken by someone who has nothing to do with the area, with the venue, in terms of ownership, I mean. Pyrkal, the governmental park in Pyrkal, the plan for the resettlement of services. So here we are. Pyrkal. Services from different ministries will be housed in this facility. No consultation has been made. The scientists are upset. They claim that this is contrary to anything that actually stands to scientific priorities and to science. They have some experience and they know what they are saying. The plan aims at transforming different buildings in the area and mainly in the city center of Athens. Some of these buildings will be turned into social housing buildings. The point is that this project has a clear real estate character, and in that the demand company is involved. And allow me to close.
Πριν σας ευχαριστήσω για την προσοχή σας. Λοιπόν, πριν από λίγες μέρες ήρθε στα χέρια μου ένα
A few days ago, I got a very interesting book by KAPPA Publications. It is called The Future of Plaka, written by Alexandros Papageorgiou Venetas. This book pertains to 2 public consultations that were made in 1976 for the preservation or demolition of buildings in Plaka. 29 people back then, the mayor Georgios Pletas and the best of architects of the time took part in this discussion and in this public consultation. Now, in our days, this public consultation has changed character. It is only based in the publication of environmental consequences study and on nothing else. But when a study of environmental consequences is presented, the truth is that everything has already been decided. people haven't been consulted, competent authorities haven't been consulted. This is the new type of public consultation. So I'm afraid that the organization of open dialogues like the one that was held about Plaka under the aegis of the state with the participation of important scientists and dialogue that pertains to very important issues like the one that we are having now about Pirkao will rarely come to fruition.
I would like to warmly thank Georgios Lialios for this mapping. Now, previously, I forgot to greet and welcome the numerous participants who are attending from the internet, so I would like to welcome them here. And our next speaker is Konstantinos Fotopoulos, chairman of KAPPA initiative, who will address the role of public property in creating public space. You have the floor.
Yes.
Hello. Mr. Lialios was long and quick. Now, my name is Konstantinos Fotopoulos, Kostas Fotopoulos, and I have the honor of being the chairman of KAPPA initiative. KAPPA initiative is an initiative launched in 2011 with some other people. I suppose you can hear me. Well, our objective back then was to participate in the dialogue and the debate about safeguarding of public property. Our initiative consists of 35 active members, and over the past years, with various professional backgrounds, and have been trying, either through participation in events like tonight's or studies, etc., to give some insights as to how we can use to the utmost public property. Now, the utilization of public property was at the forefront of my interest some years ago when I worked for a real estate. And I can remember back then that when a Minister of Finance asked me, when do you believe that public property can yield 50 billion euro? 50 billion euro out of public property. You remember probably the joke. And I said it will take more than 10, more than 20 years because public property is very difficult to be utilized. We have not even recorded or mapped it for different reasons. So today we will talk about not the public used public property, but the private public property, because someone once asked me whether we can sell the Acropolis or the Parliament. Obviously, this is not for sale, but what we are talking about is the utilization of public property. And public property's definition has to do with also the municipal public property, the private public property, which belong to various ministries, as for example the National Defense Ministry or other Ministry of Agriculture, etc. So when we talk about the creation of public spaces, of course we mean the publicly used spaces. The municipalities and all those involved in urban planning should verify where there is a need for public spaces and record that. If I'm not wrong, many municipalities have already been invited to do so, which has not been the case. And so on the basis of that mapping, on the mapping of the needs, then we will see what the location of the public property, of the existing public property is, in order to create those public spaces which are needed, which are required. And at the same time, we will also have to see whether we can expropriate private real estate in order to extend or to create public properties. Because as you know, in Greece there is a problem of lack. There is a lack of public property, public land. During the pandemic, we will all all the competent authorities would ask us to take walks in public spaces, but I can remember no other public spaces near to my house other than Patission Avenue. So, because of the climate change and other challenges, we are in desperate need of public spaces. And other than utilizing public properties or turning private properties into public property is the only way to address that problem, to face the challenge. And of course, many of you may certainly argue that, well, all that sounds great, but how are we going to find that private property? Now, we have carried out a study according to which the most flexible way is to buy a building, because expropriation sometimes can be counterproductive. I mean, if we think of how many private properties and buildings have been expropriated without any result whatsoever, we probably can understand that this is nothing else but confiscation. However, we need to find a flexible way in which we will turn private real estate into public property. And also there, we need to come up with some ways to finance similar initiatives. First, we have Ellinikon with its serious difficulties and thorny issues. It goes along, as Mr. Lialios has said, but we need to use that to the utmost. I mean, we need to see how we can use to the utmost the existence of Ellinikon. And the founding law of Ellinikon stipulates that if we increase, if the building coefficient is raised from 0.5 to 0.6, then this will bring about important revenue that may be channeled for the redevelopment of the urban spaces in Attica. And so this is very, very important in order to face the desperate needs of Attica. According to the super fund law, a part of the that revenue may be used for developmental reasons, as for example, maybe redevelopment. In my view, if I'm not wrong, the RRF also envisages the possibility to finance redevelopment, because certainly we need to take care of the quality of life of our people. So this is Attica with the minimal green spaces, as you may see. And I have added this slide because 4 years ago, according to the data available back then, we were entrusted to carry out a study financed by the Andreas to study the neighborhood parks. So these are public green spaces which are accompanied by the provision of social and public services and may become venues of socialization, etc. Their area is approximately 20 hectares, and of course the neighborhood parks will be at the service of residents who live at a radius of 450 meters, and so they may have a beneficial effect up to 1 kilometer away. The objective of neighborhood parks would be to provide a venue for families with children or elderly people. And of course, our study is available on our site. I will not tire you with further details, but this is the research team behind this study, and I would like to pay tribute to all these people, including Mr. Romanos, who has passed away some time ago, and I certainly need to pay tribute to his memory for the significant study he carried out before passing away. And so that study considered a specific area as the downgraded area between Patission Street, Lyosian Street, Vathi Square in the municipality of Athens. Back then, we identified 5 different areas, 5 different zones, according to the planning of the municipality of Athens that we took into consideration. Because, of course, it is important that we need to capitalize on the existing planning rather than intervening on the planning. So we took into consideration these zones. And when it comes to the neighborhood parks, particularly, we have some urban planning tools, as for example, the basic urban plan that entails the modification of the urban plan and expropriation for urban planning reasons, but the disadvantage is that it takes too long and in no case can it bear fruit within 5 years. The alternative tool for the creation of neighborhood parks would be to proceed with sales of real estate agreed upon. For example, the former Klonaridi Fix factory at 309 of Patission Avenue is an example. The advantages of such a scenario is that no need for urban planning, and this real estate is available for the national interest according to the planning that will be decided upon. The only problem here is that this is an incomplete, as it were, tool, because on the one hand there are constitutional problems, on the other hand we need to distribute the benefits to the beneficiaries, and we need to certainly promote an intervention with a view to rendering this tool more effective. At the same time, there are yet an alternative tool to modify the general urban plan and the regulatory plan, that is the special urban plans. And I would like to conclude by mentioning the special purpose vehicle that needs to be the the organization which will be entrusted with implementation. Thank you very much for listening.
We'd like to thank Mr. Fotopoulos for talking about the role and the capacity that the public property has. The next speaker is Mr. Efthimios Bakogiannis, who is Assistant Professor at the National Technical University of Athens, Secretary General on Spatial Planning and Urban Environment in the Ministry of Environment and Energy. He will talk about the Attica Regulatory Plan 2030, more specifically about the strategic options for an integrated and sustainable development. Mr. Bakogiannis, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a beautiful evening, and this is a beautiful venue. It is the ideal venue in order to talk about who is planning Athens. And before I start sharing some things about the Attica Regulatory Plan, some things that you may hear for the very first time, and I would like to share my thoughts with you and say that Athens is being planned by many. It depends on the scale, I would say. Athens has such a potential, such a dynamic urban planning character, such a dynamic developmental character, that depending on the kind and the scale of planning, it is a point of reference, regardless of whether you are planning the country in an urban planning level, or you are planning in the context of special urban plans, or if you plan at the level of a region, or at the scale of the general urban plan or the local urban plan, or at the scale of the urban planning study, or at the scale of urban development, or at the level of neighborhood, or at the scale of the square block. And in all these scales, at all the scales, there are different authorities that are planning, starting with the urban planning scale, where the ministry is involved, up to the level of a regulatory plan, where the region has a very important role. The regions have also their own plannings because they have many different competences that have to do with the road network and with the special issues. The municipality, of course, which is the main party, the municipality has always a vision, and the mayor has been elected because of his vision. So the municipality has a very critical role to play, and we will see very soon the urban planning that will be announced, but also has a role to play in terms of interventions at the level of neighborhoods. And I would say that there is one more scale that I didn't mention earlier, and this is the scale of the private entity. The private entities are the ones who are also planning, if, of course, the building where these private entities reside is included in the urban planning. If we want to have buildings that reflect not only the vision of the architect, but also the desires of the owners of the plot, we need to take into account the private entities, since they are part of the puzzle that make up Athens. But today I would like to talk about the regulatory plan and about our thoughts on how the new planning should take place, and why this new planning should take into account a series of initiatives that have been taken during the last few years. So the regulatory plan for Attica was institutionalized based on Law 4277 and replaced the biggest part of the previous law, Law 1515, that pertained to the environmental protection in the wider area of Athens. Given that in 2021, that is last year, Article 2 of Law 4277 of 14 defined the year 2021 as the target year for the implementation of the planning, including all the different plannings that have been drafted, and also taking into account that since its institutionalization, 5 years have passed. What is required immediately is the evaluation of the existing planning and its update or even revision. This fact becomes even more urgent given the delays that have been observed in the implementation of the provisions of 4277 pertaining to the assessment and evaluation of the urban planning. Basically, what I'm saying is that there has to be an assessment based on indices. But apart from the commitments that stemmed from the regulatory framework, the important social and economic changes that have occurred as a result of the economic crisis, but also based on the environmental conditions that have been changed due to the climate change, make the assessment of the existing plan imperative. What they also impose is the review of this planning. The policy of residence that was the main lever of growth for the Greek economy during the previous decades has radically changed since 2010. The new ways of subleasing or of short-term leasing prevailed into many neighborhoods during the economic crisis, whereas the real estate market that emerged thanks to the Golden Visa program reshaped entire areas in the city center. These trends basically had, as a result, an important increase of the rents in many areas of Athens. And this, of course, affected mainly the low-income groups, the students, but also the middle-income families. Basically, we're talking about a gentrification process during which people living in the city center are expelled so as for their residences to be used for tourism purposes. And this intensification of phenomena that cannot be measured, but also given the size of the number of the residences that have been used for this purpose, make necessary the promotion of proposals and ideas that will ensure the social cohesion in many areas of Athens and that will ensure the diversity of these areas. Already in the major capitals of Europe, measures are being taken to deal with this type of phenomena. Moreover, during the last 10 years, the intensity of weather phenomena that has been the result of climate change has caused serious problems in different cities, including Athens. The international urban planning trend talks about resilient cities and the features that these cities need to have in order to resist the pressure that will be exercised by this type of extreme weather phenomena. The update of all this planning, of course, aims at the evaluation of the implementation of the existing regulatory plan, as well as to its review, as long, of course, as this is deemed necessary. Some basic issues that need to be dealt with by an updated regulatory plan, in my view, are the following. We have some population trends based on the recent process that was completed in 2021, and these trends have intensified since 2011. We have migratory flows that create problems, but also present some major prospects for the future. The intensity of the migration flows in the Mediterranean region has increased considerably, given, of course, the social and economic developments in the countries of origin. The modern megacities of the European South, including Athens, are called to resolve the problem of assimilating these migrants and of ensuring the provision of social services. The phenomenon of the downgrading and marginalization of many areas is also a very important problem. We need to identify these areas and also understand which are the causes that have led to this situation if we want to make specific proposals and promote specific interventions. Some sectoral, structural changes of economic development and evolution of the region, like deindustrialization, the central operations, the development and evolution of production zones, the new forms of tourism development, all of these things since 2014 onwards, along with the development of the production activities of the capital that has some very specific characteristics. All of these have to be assessed, evaluated, measured if we want to shape the new special planning standard. Moreover, the building stock of Athens and of Attica in general changed radically during the years of the economic crisis, both in terms of size and in terms of characteristics. Real estate played an important role in shaping the central neighborhoods, promoting important changes in the social composition. The prevailing idea about a mixed land use seems to be overthrown by the demands of the market. And now what we are looking for are ways in order to put an end to this trend. We have some areas like Pagratia, Belokipi, Neapoli, Kypseli, areas that were developed, quote unquote, in the areas of 60s and 70s have become very old. The buildings in these areas are old, and we need to find a way to reverse this trend. Illegal building, major issue. This point of illegal construction, illegal buildings has led to the downgrading of the urban environment. We have a plethora of laws since 2010 until today. 4 laws have been passed in order to regularize the illegal buildings. But still, it is a major problem, a difficult problem to be resolved, because it is a distortion, if you like, that has been created during the last few decades. The management of urban gaps, for example, comes in the town tissue, industrialized zones, cemeteries, derelict neighborhoods, derelict buildings, neighborhoods of Athens and of Piraeus, derelict and abandoned industrial buildings in the city center. All these are issues to be taken into account. Moreover, in 2022, we expect to have a redevelopment of real estate properties. And, of course, we are expecting the development of the Ellinikon Park. There's going to be also the government park in Pirkal, where ministries will be housed, the development of a biotechnology park in Peania, the development of the innovation community in Phaleron with the use of the Hofri industrial plant in Piraeus Street, the development of Campus Estate in Kandja, the old buildings of Iohalco in Tavros, and many other things are going to be developed in 2022. Last but not least, I would like to say that one of the basic criteria is the evaluation of the existing green spaces. We need to update the standards, and we need to ensure that motives will be given in order to expand and connect the existing green spaces, in order to promote the interconnection of areas of entertainment, like the coastal zone with green spaces in the city center. Yes, I'm about to finish. I would just like to say that in the context of the recommended regulations, some indexes and incentives will be taken into account. I mentioned the establishment of standards for the measurement of green spaces that correspond to square meters and to citizens. All this is important, as well the steps are important if we want to upgrade the urban environment of Athens. These are going to be the directions that the purveyors will take into account. I am sure that the tender will be announced soon, and I'm also sure that the regulatory plan of Athens will be put to consultation and will be a topic of discussion in the future.
Thank you very much, Professor. And the next speaker is Dimitris Poulios, architect, urban designer from Thymio Papayannis and Associates, who will address Athens, an incomplete city, planning and governance towards a cohesive and resilient Mediterranean capital. You have the floor, sir. Thank you very much. I would like to warmly thank the Schwarz Foundation and Mr. Giacumacatos for having me here. I am delighted to be here with people whom I have cooperated in the past. You cannot hear me, says the speaker. Probably, yes. Now, yes. Thank you. I believe it was off. Now it's on. So, thank you. And I believe that this very first meeting gives important stimuli that will give rise to a very interesting debate in the future as well. Now, the question, who is planning Athens, is a question that is at the heart of our concerns for many stakeholders, including professors, urban planners, special planners, ministers, politicians, and so on and so forth. This is a question that was asked many generations ago and still is very topical. But I believe that the way in which we are addressing it today has to do with the recovery of a city after a lengthy recession, in this important conjuncture in view of the pandemic and also the climate change that I would like to underline, given its significance and critical role today. Now, what is the city we are talking about? And I believe that we need to provide an overview of the past before addressing the future. Now, of course, today's picture of Athens is the offspring of the post-war urbanization, the small land property having played an important role, and with a state focusing mainly on a social policy through building and construction activity. And so there has been a twofold result. On the one hand, we had the miracle of being able to provide housing for millions of people in the capital. On the other hand, many distortions have stemmed from that, with the private space prevailing over the public space, the lack of open spaces, public spaces, fragmentation, and so on and so forth. But I believe that at the same time, we have also seen the creation of a quite a resilient system, a system resistant to change, so that the policy pursued for decades was widely accepted. As a result, the initiatives of the 80s and the 90s have been incomplete because they have been criticized and the object of great resistance. And so the identity of Athens today is puzzling, but at the same time, it is a city with great potential. Now, when it comes to 2022, there will be a series of interventions and the change of paradigm that is the continuation of initiatives taken in the past that, however, have not been crowned with success. And the crises we have experienced were very critical because they shed light on the question, who is planning Athens, from a different perspective. And this has to do not only with Athens, but of course with other capitals. In 2008, after a long-term prosperity period, we were confronted with a series of crises, including the financial recession, pandemic, climate crisis, and so on and so forth, the migrant crisis, etc. And so this becomes the very core of our debates, the debates across and throughout Europe. And experience is eloquent as to how we need to address future challenges. I would like to provide some examples. In Barcelona and Berlin, municipal authorities decided to regulate tourism in order to also boost social housing, a participatory approach. Important steps have been taken towards sustainable mobility, with Paris and then Barcelona being at the forefront. You may see the super blocks here from Barcelona. So the amalgamation of building blocks and the cessation of use of private cars by 2030. It is not by accident that 3 out of 7 of the EUMIS award finalists have to do with social housing units. This paves the way and shows what needs to be our vision in the future. The European Commission, for example, in 2017 approved Giacumacatos project on mission-oriented innovation policies, challenges and opportunities that presented a methodology as to how we may implement efficient and effective policies. You may see here some important new trends in policy making, as for example, that successful are the policies which are ambitious, which are participatory, which are measurable, and so on and so forth. And at this point, allow me to share with you what the vision of Athens, in my view, could be in the future. Let us give some hints in order to open up debate. When it comes to planning, I believe it is imperative to create an integrated policy vis-à-vis a metropolitan Athens. There's no doubt that this is a period of recovery with an important reactivation investment, private investment, but also public investments in Athens. I don't mean to tire you, of course, with the detail as to the specific circumstances under which that investments are being made. However, at the same time, fragmentation is still visible. We can see some prioritization of the seafront and the downtown Athens, for example, disregarding the suburbs or other zones of Athens. And this is an important flaw we need to remedy. Secondly, when we talk about planning or replanning, redesign of cities, we need to proceed to promote interventions. And so we need to implement cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary projects focusing on mitigating climate change and in promoting urban sustainability. This conjuncture calls for complicated solutions, complex solutions, multifaceted, far-reaching solutions. I would like to make reference to the cultural hydrants of the municipality of Halandri and the ISI for the Adrianio waterworks and the reservoir. These are some intervention examples that need to be at the heart of our debate. These are some indicative pictures of on the interventions. The same logic was also embraced by the study carried out by the KAPPA initiative that Mr. Fotopoulos mentioned earlier, which focus on the neighborhood parks and the use of public spaces as the revisiting of public spaces in a new logic of planning. Some indicative maps and pictures. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. But what is very important is that a sustainable city needs to be also a just city. We cannot discuss the refurbishment of and the replanning of our city when we have these exacerbated inequalities. Sometimes we tend to disregard that we have experienced a decade of deep recession, of deep inequalities, and these are the data dating back to just 2011. So you may see the indexes of deprivation and how they have evolved in the decade 1991-2011, and it goes without saying that the abrupt rise in rent will create additional problems as to the access to housing, which will be highly problematic for the identity of our city. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of good practices out there that Athens may reproduce, but we need to take far-reaching initiatives in various sectors through a targeted regulatory master plan. But of course, all that is not feasible unless we come up with a metropolitan governance system, not only in order to provide guidance, central guidance to planning, but also to be up to the task of addressing the various challenges that our city is confronted with. And when we think of natural disasters as the LPs, for example, this also is another important element we need to consider. Despite innovations that we saw in the past, we have seen the abolishment of a series of organizations and agencies that have not been substituted. And so there is a great gap that we need to bridge. And of course, the new planning needs to promote a participatory approach, transparency. And of course, when we are to affect the daily life of our people, we need to come up with a new social pact. Otherwise, we will see the creation of segregated teams and groups of citizens, hostile groups, one against the other, suspicion, and so on and so forth. So we need to reach out to people, to involve them. And of course, when trying to find solutions, we need to keep in mind that we should not only be interested in technical and technocratic solutions. First and foremost, we need to reconceptualize, to revisit the guiding principles of the planning of Athens over the past decade. Dialogue, for example, when it comes to the access to housing, does not only it has to do with revisiting the existing paradigm, the paradigm of the consideration, the contractual consideration, or the land for flat logic and philosophy. I am sure that most of us took the opportunity of the pandemic to have a walk around our houses for the first time. And so we need to keep on to intensify similar initiatives. And we also need to redefine what we mean by a green way of living and how this affects the redesign of our city. And I would like to conclude by this interesting picture, the vision of Athens, the mission of Athens, and the road act, the important road actions as the connection with the Adrianian aqueduct. So we need to recover and to tap the potential of Athens by involving and engaging all. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you so much, Mr. Dimitris Poulios, for this analysis, for the ideas you have shared with us. And now we would like to give the floor to Maro Evangelidou, architect, city and spatial planner, president of the Institutional Framework Council of Elliniki Eteria, Society for the Environment and Cultural Heritage. Her presentation is entitled Governance Deficit in Promoting Integrated Urban Planning Projects in Athens. Interesting, no?
Γεια σας. Να βγάλω αυτό. Ακούγομαι.
Can you hear me? I would like to thank you in my turn. I would like to thank Schwarz Foundation for the invitation. I truly believe that the debate we are having is really interesting, and that the initiative taken by Gennadius Library and by Schwarz Foundation is a very important one. It's very important to have debates like these, because apart from governance deficit, we also have a dialogue deficit. My intervention will touch upon 3 issues. I believe that it is very important. I would like you to confirm whether I'm right or not, that it is not my idea that we need integrated programs. Many people say, oh, forget about the general ones, let's do something specific, something special. I know that this is difficult to be done. There are many demands and requirements for integrated programs, and it's good to know which are these requirements. And I also believe that the major obstacle that we need to overcome is the mentality that has prevailed for so many years. I would like to tell you that I'm going to talk to you as a civil servant, since I have experience in the public administration and I have been part of the drafting team for the regulatory plan for Athens, but also I will talk to you as a citizen and as part of a citizens group that has made important effort in order to intervene and to submit proposals. So what are the integrated programs and which are the requirements? I will give you 2 keywords. They are multi-sectoral and programs that involve different funds. We have now realized that urban planning is a tool for the development of urban planning for growth, but also for environmental protection. Moreover, the European Union concept about urban planning aims at reducing waste when it comes to micro-projects and promotes an integrated approach. Of course, that doesn't mean that we not implement micro-projects, but what is the context in which we include them. The point is that the integrated programs have increased requirements in terms of coordination and of maturity, but it is worth of being discussed and of being a topic of a dialogue. So maturity. When I hear that this project is mature, something happens to me. I don't know if this is my problem. I hope that it's not just my problem. It is very important to have the bigger picture, and it's important to have a public dialogue about this bigger picture. And I'm talking about the Great Walk. We didn't hear the mayor saying that we have this regulatory plan that includes a network of bicycle lanes, which in the case of Panepistemio, this bicycle lane is part of Panepistemio Street. We never heard anyone saying that it's better to leave the car and take the mass transport means. As the technocrats, we want the politicians to support the proposals we make, and we need their support, even if it is limited support. Like, for example, for the tolls. For the tolls, there had been several proposals. Many of these haven't been implemented. The point is that there is this dialogue about the tolls. Now, with regard to the metropolitan interventions of the Regulatory Plan, those that are integrated at least, and I apologize, but I'm going to skip some slides, says the speaker. So with regard to these, I would like to say that it is very important to mention them. And these interventions have been strategic interventions for the last few years, and this term strategic has become a trend during the last few years, used by people all around the world, because it proves that interventions that have this dimension and this targeting can be very effective and very important. However, we're not talking about metropolitan interventions only. We're talking about the need of having an integrated approach, even when it comes to smaller size interventions and smaller projects. We have the Drasis program, and I would like to say a few words about this program following the announcement made by Mayor Bakogiannis that he is going to review the regulatory plan for Athens. I would be very satisfied if the Drasis program that was ready, you have the link, by the way, you can visit the site. So the Drasis program was ready. It was ready to be updated, to be institutionalized. Unfortunately, it did not proceed to anything tangible. This was a sad development because this program had some very effective solutions to the different problems that we are facing. This program included solutions that pertain to the need of reviewing the regulatory plan. And I would like to remind you that in 1979, when I first started working, there were some participatory processes for the regulatory plan. And the technical chamber has contributed to these processes with its president, Mr. Diamandopoulos, back then. Then the processes of 1983 for 1985 for the Tritsy period, and then the processes of debate for the last regulatory plan, which I remind you started in 1997 with the first conference of the Athens organization for the update of the regulatory plan, in the context of which they kept track of the international developments. I don't believe that there is a serious reason to change the regulatory plan right now. Allow me to drink some water. The abolition of the organization was a major problem. Mr. Poulios mentioned that earlier as well. This organization has been replaced by anything else. We hope that there's going to be a structure, a body for the metropolitan governance. We hope that this will become a reality. Unfortunately, the company redevelopment SA that replaced the EAHA confirms this rationale. The housing of the ministries now. I don't want to touch upon this issue. Those of you who want can find on YouTube our views on that. We also gave a press conference in cooperation with other organizations, with the Association of Urban Planners. We believe that it will be a major mistake. It was a major mistake. Then that, on the contrary, the ministries could be housed in compliance with the provisions of the regulatory plan. Now, I would like to give you 4 examples. The first example is the example of the derelict buildings that can be used as a major tool. Eleonas, which is a difficult and complex metropolitan program, and 2 smaller ones that are at the level of municipality, and the governance problem would be far simpler to be solved. I would like to start by the derelict buildings. This started as an institutional initiative taken by the municipality of Athens. It has been submitted to the ministry. A research program followed that. Unfortunately, the results of that program haven't been published yet. It would be very interesting to have this research program published, but okay, the draft of law has been published. It has been submitted to the ministry. The previous political leadership has denied that there was any reason to implement such a program without, however, making a counter proposal. However, there is an issue, if you like, that relates to this not publication, not surfacing of this tool, and that it relates to what extent the authorizations that the public authorities give to the municipality to intervene in derelict buildings, to what extent this will be done on a case-by-case basis or will pertain to entire areas. I believe that it is not good to have a wider area implementation. There should be a case-by-case approach. Of course, you will ask why, since we need an integrated approach and since you, Maro, you insist on the targeted and a specific intervention. Because I believe that in order for a tool to be operational, it has to be tested at individual building level that takes into account the ownership status, the social layering of a city. If we don't test this on a building level, we will make a major mistake. Of course, we will see what we are going to do when this program is published. Now, this is an example that I'm giving you. This is the example of the Piraeus building. There is talk of the building being demolished. We already have a demolished building there, and we haven't done anything with it. The expropriation hasn't happened yet. By the way, I would like to inform you that there is a very, very good solution that can be found exactly next to it, of a public service that hasn't never been used. For example, there could be a partly construction and the remaining to be an open space. So apart from that, there are many other buildings that are not being used properly. The second example is Eleonas, which is complex issue of governance. I read what the regulatory plan says about Eleonas. When we were drafting the plan, we were thinking that Eleonas could become the area of innovation, just like at ICOS 22 in Barcelona. It is, in other words, a brown field that has wonderful advantages in terms of spatial planning and very good prospects for development. They are downgraded because for various different reasons, which I would not like to mention right now since it would take me hours. The point is that there are many reasons behind the current situation that prevails in Eleonas area. There are ideological reasons, political reasons, different sorts of reasons. The point is that right now, Eleonas, although it has this potential and although it is included in the regulatory plan, it doesn't have what At 22 had in Barcelona. In other words, here we don't have the urban management skills that are deeply needed. Now, before I proceed to what the municipality is doing, allow me to go through this example very quickly. This is an architectural centric approach for Eleonas. Of course, it's easy to make these designs, but architects need to be aware of the history of the designs that preceded theirs, of the history of the area, of the stage that different interventions are in the area. Because, okay, architects may have very beautiful ideas, but the point is that they need to keep into account some practical issues. You don't have any more time, unfortunately. Okay, I will be very, very quick. Botanikos area. Allow me to say that the approach is rather positive, but it is based on regulatory provision. on the basis of which, and this was mentioned by Georgios Lialios, that first we start with the investment idea and then we proceed to an ad hoc provision that may be in contrast to the plans. The point is that the municipality of Athens has taken some positive initiatives, but the initiatives that will be taken in the future need to be more advanced. This is a design showing Athens and the deficit of governance in Athens. This is the result of research. I would like to give you an example. It's very important to know this example. I'm talking about the data center. In any city of the world, when there is an area like Eleonas that aspires to become the area of innovation, it is important, as you can understand, to attract data centers. What we did was to come up with a provision that this could actually be located in a rural land. Why did we ever decide to do that? I don't understand. Now, I would like to say something about the historic center. The network for the historic center has made some proposals pertaining to public space. We are eagerly awaiting the post-COVID era to see what will happen with regard to this. Of course, important factors have been taken into account, like noise pollution and many others. If we want to have people living in the center, we need to resolve all these problems. And this is an example of a proposal we made and of intervention we made in a neighborhood. We asked for a controlled parking to be implemented and at the same time to promote the plantation in Athens and also to promote some pedestrian areas that could be used by the people as they would start their walk in the Great Walk of Athens. I believe that if we promoted plantation, then we could, if we could promote planting in Athens, we could actually increase the size of green spaces in Athens. And this is what we wanted to show by making this proposal. And I hope that the municipality will embrace it. Maybe there was some predicament with the controlled parking spaces, but the point is that this can easily be resolved.
Να μας κλείσει ένα ραντεβού με τις υπηρεσίες. Ελπίζω τώρα που είναι ο Δήμαρχος.
I hope that now that we have the mayor present, he will take all this into account and all things will be resolved. I apologize for taking more of your time and thank you very much.
We would like to thank Mrs. Vagelidou for the targeted observations, and now I would like to give the floor to the Mayor of Athens, Mr. Kostas Bakogiannis. You have the floor, sir.
Να καλησπερίσω και να πω ένα πάρα πολύ...
I would like to congratulate you on the initiative, and I would like to welcome all of you, and thank you very much for having me here. Give me a second, please. I need some water. I'm so thirsty. Now, you know, to be able to serve as a mayor of Athens, one needs to be an optimist. And so allow me to start by saying this. This is the very moment for Athens. This is a golden moment for Athens, as 10 years ago it was the golden moment for Lisbon, and 20 years ago the golden moment for Barcelona. But we need to be frank, saying that we have suffered. I mean, exactly when we started recovering after the financial crisis and the migrant crisis, the pandemic exacerbated the pressure. But before the perfect storm of crisis, Athens had suffered its own particular crisis. From 2000 to 2020, 2 out of 5 citizens of Athens have abandoned this city. Allow me to repeat that. 2 out of 5 Athenians have abandoned the city. And to a large extent, this is a successful of the Greek state. So congratulations, well done. You know, according to some, there's no continuation to the Greek state. This is not the case, because In 1985, we had a regulatory master plan, and then a series of regulations would incentivize devolution, that is, the abandonment of the historical center. And of course, this is a period of transition, and I fully understand the concern expressed, the concern experienced by many who argue, well, just a moment, so many things are taking place, the Ellinikon, the governmental park. We have an explosion, as it were, of investments. We have 20 new hotels being erected around Homonia Square. So at the end of the day, what is Athens in 2022? What is it like in 2030, excuse me? And in case 2030 sounds too distant, allow me to say that it is, as if we said how distant 2012 is. So let us not waste yet another opportunity. So importantly, first, we need to have a plan. And the plan needs to go beyond a single municipal mandate, a plan that will exceed the mandate given and will bring us together no matter the ideologies and private opinions. And secondly, that plan needs to be feasible, okay? And this does not mean, of course, that we need to focus only on execution. However, if we have managed to draw a lesson in this city because of negative experiences, we have experienced, in the best scenario, some fragmented executions, or in the worst case scenario, interventions which have not been implemented. Athens has been thoroughly and repeatedly studied, but has managed to enjoy very few interventions. Allow me to provide just with an example. In Theatru Square, I'm not sure whether you are familiar with that. It is a flagship square in downtown Athens, at least for some of us who enjoyed Athens in the 90s. It's a very beautiful square. I'm not the only one. I'm glad. Thank you. So we have updated a study on Theatru Square, which was completed 12 years ago, if I'm not wrong. And this is eloquent. Or Vasilissis Olgas Avenue, again, according to a study that whose tender will be published shortly, is based on a study carried out many years ago, 12 years ago. So too many studies in too many drawers, ladies and gentlemen. But let me go back to today. Two challenges, worldwide and the local one. The worldwide, climate change, climate crisis. No need to say much. But let me put that simply, well, slightly exaggerated. Unless we safeguard efficiently, immediately our city, our children will drown during winter and will burn during summer. And there's another challenge, the local challenge we are reticent to. First of all, the Ellinikon, and I have to say that I am in favor of Ellinikon. I am glad and delighted to see the Ellinikon-related investment being made. However, for the city of Athens, this may be either a blessing or a curse. And let me elaborate on that. Growth in Ellinikon, as per definition, will shift economic and social life of Attica on the seafront. Inevitably, for the very first time since the auto year, the city will embrace the seafront, will focus the eyes on the sea. And when I'm saying the city, of course, I don't just think of Kolonaki or Syntagma Square, but the whole municipality of Athens, which risks of becoming a follower in this growth. And here lies the challenge of speeding up to implementing the intervention so that the one metropolitan pole will carry away the other one. So the growth on the one hand will go in hand with the growth in the other pole of Athens, and not so we don't have time to waste. And the municipality of Athens has a couple of priority axes. First, redistribution of spaces. In Greece, we have the highest number of square meters per inhabitant. Secondly, we have the highest number of square meters of asphalt per inhabitant. Thirdly, not surprisingly, we have the lowest level of green spaces per inhabitant, which means that in the very forthcoming years, we will have to struggle in terms of square meters, and struggle has the victors and the vanquished, and this goes for all the battles, all the struggles across the world. Second priority axis for the municipality of Athens, sustainable mobility. Simply, when not only the drivers are entitled to specific rights, pedestrians also have specific rights, or even the users of the trottinette users are also entitled to rights. And you know what? This is the second most important battle of this decade. This is the battle between human beings and vehicles. In the 20th century, we used to plan cities focusing on motor vehicles. Now we need to get rid of that. Otherwise, our cities will be intolerable. And third priority axis, mixed uses. Put it simply, again, if you have a walk at Kogia Square or Athens Street, you will see an unprecedented privilege no other town hall has throughout Europe. If you go out of the town hall, there's a boutique hotel, one of its kind, a marvelous restaurant you could probably encounter in New York, and many other small shops which provide spices and locks. And so this is what we mean by mixed uses. We don't want Athens to be deprived of its DNA, of its psyche. And this is important for us and for our children. Athens should become not a neoclassic Disneyland, right? This is by far the worst scenario ever. Even the most passionate supporters of tourist growth acknowledge that today visitors pursue experience. And this is something we should not deprive our city of. And so the aforementioned three priority axes are very important to us because we intend to promote the creation of a destination of the 21st century visitors. And there are two levels. First, the level of everyday life. Why? Because certainly you will agree with me in saying that, well, it's so interesting to listen to our mayor talking about 2030, 2040, 2050. On the other hand, though, the bet, what is at stake today is the everyday life of our citizens. Everyday life which needs to cease to be silly. And I dare to say that, for example, this has to do with cleanliness, with the extent to which our city is clean. And I have to say that the levels of our city is clean is unprecedented. Or again, electric lighting, street lighting, we keep on increasing LED bulbs, asphalt covering, the great many kilometers of municipal streets being asphalted, and at the same time there's yet another level, the level of an Athens, which will be more humane, friendlier. We are in need of green, sustainable ecosystems with an identity, not only downtown Athens, but also in the suburbs. Nearby, there's the Lycabettus works taking place, the National Park, or the Strepi Hill, which will be launched shortly, the Plato Academy, the Omonia Square project, yes, without a tender. However, I believe that the result will prove us right. And many other studies that date back to 2000, 2003, etc. And even the Panepistimiou firstly proposed, suggested by Adonis Tritis when I was 3 years old. And allow me to attempt to give an answer to the question, who is it planning Athens? Ladies and gentlemen, the municipality of Athens, since over the past 2 years, but I know that my predecessors, regardless of their political affiliation, will corroborate that, is characterized by a feeling of being loneliness, the lack of an institutional framework, often lead us to continuous disagreement and tensions without any real reason. We have seen great successes, as for example, our success in replanting the trees of the subway stations. That was a victory, and at the same time, of course, there are also the defeats. We have not managed to remedy the fragmentation, and there are some defeats with uncertain result as to what will happen with the building stock, the void building stock after the implementation of the governmental park, which has not been discussed as deserved. You know, there is the Tsarouchis doctrine, according to whom the best idea with the city is to demolish. Now, on the other hand, our slogan is, and I will put that simply, we can turn some buildings into social housing. We know how important this is. Some other buildings may have social uses, some other may be leased in order to increase the revenue of the municipality, and some others may be used in order to create public spaces, because we are in desperate need of them, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, I was thinking of how to conclude this speech, and I believe that by far the best way to do that is by reminding you the words of the President of the Republic, Tsatos, when he was welcoming Chirac, before becoming the President of the French Republic, when he was a mayor of Paris. And if I'm not wrong, there is a mention here in the library, sir. So Tsatos, an erudite, back then said, there are rich cities, there are powerful cities, and there are cities' ideas. in Athens is a city idea. So we deserve to be optimists. I believe that we all deserve to be optimists, not only the mayor. Thank you. Please, Mayor, please stay on the stage. I would like to thank the Mayor of Athens, Kostas Bakogiannis. I would like to warmly thank you, and I would like to ask all the participants to take their seats on stage in order to have a debate. This will be a brief debate, not too long, some reasonable time in order to have a Q&A session, as it were. And the questions may be raised either by those who are physically here with us, and the people, the audience, but also questions may be raised from one speaker to the other. You have the floor. The floor is open, rather. And please introduce yourself before you ask your question. Please use the mic in order to be translated. The participants need to use their mic in order for the interpreters to be able to listen to them, of course.
Ναι.
Κώστας Μπούτσικος λέγομαι.
Kostas Vouchikos is my name, freelancer, civil engineer, 35 years of experience. I would start by changing the title of today's event. Not who is planning, but can we plan Athens? 35 years now, we have all the drafts of laws of all the areas of Athens. And you understand that this, of course, has had many consequences, as the journalist of Kathimerini said. What I'm asking is, can we actually create a new public space? Do we truly have the tools to use and to do that? Can we truly create new public spaces? Can we reduce the surface ratio? Can we develop entertainment parks? Do we have the tools and the ability to do all these? So the debate actually focuses on what we can utilize and redevelop, what we can use from the existing building stock. And the other thing I would like to say is that for so many years, I have been hearing people making different verifications. Some of the speakers, the lady, if I'm not mistaken, said that we have a deficit of dialogue. We don't have such a deficit. We are champions in dialogue. What we are lacking is software, tools. We are lacking people like Perakakis, the Minister of Digital Governance. We need these type of people. So next day, we can ask ourselves, can we actually do all these things that we are envisaging? Secondly, what we are lacking is imagination. Please, you shouldn't make verifications, like you said. No, right now, in Greece, and because of the disastrous fire in Mati, what is being implemented is a development plan, and I believe that it is a unique opportunity for this government to approach planning in a completely different way. However, it hasn't realized that. It approaches Mati area as an area where illegal construction could once again take place. So what I would like to say is what I said in the beginning. We need to develop new public spaces. Thank you and good luck. Who would like to comment on that? Is there any comment you would like to make? Mr. Bakogiannis, is your microphone on? Okay, yes. I would like to make some comments because this issue of public space is something that concerns me deeply. We are now in a very unpleasant position. Why? Because very recently, or better, for many years now, there have been some negative decisions taken by our country that pertain to private ownership, private property, and how these properties can be exploited by public organizations in order then to be turned into public spaces. Me, as president of the Central Council for Urban Plans, in a very difficult position because very often we have conviction rulings that are not in the right direction. And the fact is that the private property cannot be kept, quote unquote, by the public organizations without giving any revenue to the private owner. But there is also the question of where the public organizations will find the money in order to build new buildings. So this is a topic that we need to take into account. Already, the Recovery and Resilience Fund has made some effort to introduce a program for green spaces. And you know that apart from that, we also have the Green Fund that actually provides funds for urban environment projects. An increase of an additional 2.5% could actually give 100 million euros on an annual basis that could be given to the local authorities and to the public organizations so that they compensate the private owners for taking their property. So there is an organization that has kept some private properties in captive. And these private properties cannot remain in captivity for a long period of time. Now there are tools in order to develop public spaces without finding refuge to this solution. There is also an economic counterweight that needs to be developed. In the study that we have done for the parks, there is another issue that is being raised. And that is the purchase of a private property to be made not on the basis of expropriation. Can't we possibly buy buildings? Right now, any municipality can buy a property, but the point is that this is not done quickly. The example of Fix, for example, the municipality owned it for the very first moment. It could do whatever it wanted. So, Georgios Lialios. I was listening to the gentleman saying that he has been listening to the same things for so many years. I share his concern because we have also been writing about the same things for so many years. Unfortunately, the sound of Mr. Lialios is not good. I will disagree with Mr. Bakogiannis, and I would like to say something with regard to public spaces that have been blocked. Okay, it's not right to block the property of private entities. Okay, but the legislation has evolved greatly in the last few years, following the direction that is based on expropriation. Expropriation has become far easier now, and the Green Fund, as Mr. Bakogiannis said, and allow me to disagree with what he said about 2.5%. I believe that the existing percentage is sufficient as long as the funds existing in the Green Fund were used in the right direction, in the right way. The percentage given by the Greek Fund for the purchase of buildings is is at a level that, okay, is satisfactory right now. Yes, it could be improved in the future. But the point is that the Green Fund right now is filling some holes that have been existing for so many years. I apologize, but it is very difficult to hear what Mr. Lialios is saying. Yes, we could use the Green Fund in order to buy more public spaces, but I repeat that money is there. What we are lacking is willingness to do something with it. I would like to agree with what Mr. Lialios said about the Green Fund, and I would like to add something more. The revenues of the Green Fund come from the illegal buildings, and there is the issue of distribution per municipality. And normally, maybe Athens is not a municipality that has increased revenues from illegal buildings, but there is some capacity there. So what we need to do, whether we are actually recording the revenues coming from illegal buildings on a municipality basis, and we should also see whether the Ministry of Finance is actually receiving these revenues. Now, with regard to the Green Fund, there was an issue of the plot ratio. We have two tools to use with regard to that. I would like to remind you that the draft of law for the redevelopment plans that we had ready since 2018 with Mr. Dimitris actually touches upon this issue and uses a tool that is called the right of preference, which is a very simple tool, on the basis of which, when someone wants to sell a plot of land, they first ask the municipality. And if the municipality wishes to buy it, they buy it. So this means that the municipality no longer deprives of private entities their property. This is a very effective tool, which unfortunately, for some bureaucratic reasons, hasn't given any results. Why? Because there wasn't increased interest on the part of the competent authorities. Comments are off the microphone. Now, there is another tool, again mentioned by the gentleman who posed the question, which is pertaining to the reduction of plot ratio. And what I would like to say focuses on Athens. Okay, we have many studies about Athens, but these studies haven't been implemented in practice. The urban planning for Athens has been institutionalized since 1985, but no study for its updating has taken place. So this is a pending issue. The reduction of a plot ratio that is included in this urban planning has to finally take place. The only person that actually made some steps in that direction was Stefanos Manos in 1999, all around Athens, all around the Attica Basin. Yes, and he wasn't re-elected. Correct. Yes, this is true. He managed not to be re-elected, and he was also the first person who developed the residential control zone, an initiative that saved Athens and especially the island of Aegina. There are certain areas that can be improved, and I believe that the systematic monitoring of all these can actually give us some good results. Yes, the lady would like to ask something.
Well, the comment is off microphone, thus it cannot be translated.
Ποιος συντονίζει αυτούς που σχεδιάζουν την Αθήνα. Γιατί υπάρχει ένα έλλειμμα συντονισμού όλων αυτών, όχι μόνο σε διαφορετικά επίπεδα και στα ίδια επίπεδα που γνωρίζει η αριστερά και η δεξιά. Η κυρία Ευαγγελίδου έθεσε ένα πάρα πολύ σημαντικό ζήτημα. Καταρχήν, ο Γιώργος Lialios με το καταπληκτική προκίνηση μίλησε για τις συνεχείς παρεκκλήσεις. Αυτό είναι ένα πρόβλημα φιλοσοφίας που έθιμε, διότι μιλάμε για συνεχή παραγωγή σχεδίων πολυδομικών και όχι σχεδιασμού. Για να κάνεις σχεδιασμό, χρειάζεσαι μια συνέχεια, το έθιξε ο Δήμαρχος, πρέπει να έχουμε και για τον επόμενο Δήμαρχο και για την επόμενη πεντηκονταετία πρέπει να σχεδιάσουμε. Άρα λοιπόν η συνεχή διαδικασία του σχεδιασμού αναζητείται από εμάς τους πολεμόνους σε αυτή την πόλη και τη χώρα. Η κυρία Βαγγελίδου μίλησε για ένα κρίσιμο ζήτημα. Στο κέντρο της Αθήνας αυτή τη στιγμή σχεδιάζεται ούτε καν από το Υπουργείο Περιβάλλοντος, αλλά από άλλους φορείς, να απομακρυνθούν χρήσεις που ζωοδοτούν την πόλη εδώ και δεκαετίες. Ποιος αποφασίζει γι' αυτό? Ακούσαμε τον Δήμαρχο Αθηναίων με πολύ ειλικρίνεια και διαφάνεια και πραγματικά σας συγχαίρω, ούτως ή άλλως σας αγαπούμε πολύ, αλλά σας συγχαίρω ακόμα μια φορά για την ειλικρίνεια και τη διαφάνεια με την οποία νιώθουμε μοναξιά. Ο Δήμαρχος Αθηναίων νιώθει μοναξιά. Στο κέντρο της πόλης σχεδιάζεται χωρίς τον ζωνοδόχο. Αυτά θα ήθελα να θέσω σαν.
Ωραία. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ.
Thank you. Any comment, any observation? Mayor, you have the floor. No, look, I certainly could subside to the temptation to say that, to play a bit with the title, saying the basic question is not who is planning Athens, but rather who is not planning Athens. But you know what? It's very easy to take the bad examples into consideration. Let's just consider a positive example mentioned by Mrs. Evangelidou, double regeneration. If I'm not wrong, you will know what that means, right? I mean, it's the creation of two growth poles in Botanikos and Alexandras Avenue. In Alexandras Avenue, we will get rid of the Panathinaikos Stadium, so we will have plenty of space there. On the other hand, in Botanikos, we will have a series of facilities, infrastructure, the municipality of Athens, and other sports facilities, and all that is will be an incentive that will attract more than 400 million euro investment. If I'm not wrong, the first time the idea occurred was dates back in 2006. And I can remember that some years afterwards there was the approval of the environmental impact study by the Council of State, and since then that project has been frozen. Now it's a matter of time now that this project will eventually be implemented. What was the delay though? You know what? Because there was eventually there was a clear institutional framework that clearly defined who does what, with a very strict framework, thanks also to the intervention of the Council of State. Now, what was the reason for the delay in the implementation of this project? Why? Because the municipality of Athens had not seen its role, the role it had to shoulder officially. I mean, the municipality of Athens is supposed to be the enabler, the facilitator, the authority in charge of implementation and monitoring, was seen with some extent, with some degree of suspicion by the political state. Now, it is now as if the municipality of Athens is 18 years old, able to implement a 250 million euro worth project. And of course, I'm thinking of the municipality as an organization, not as a mayor. It is unprecedented for the municipality of Athens to shoulder such an important responsibility. So what are the lessons to be drawn? First, the importance of integrated planning. Second, the importance this integrated planning to turn into institutional, tangible results for us politicians to know and to find out that there are boundaries when it comes to our mandate and to our powers. We are not used to that. This is not something really familiar for the political staff of our country, but it's not bad, I assure you. And third, to entrust the 325 municipalities across Greece, to entrust them with the implementation of projects in order for real and tangible steps to be taken forward. Thank you. The lady back there, kindly wait for the mic, please.
Σε ποιον από τους δύο?
A question for Mr. Bakogiannis. Who out of you? You know we are not relatives. Yes, I know. No, my question goes to the professor, to Professor Bakogiannis, and stems from the fact that I live in the center of Athens, and I know that walking in downtown Athens, as Mrs. Evangelidou anticipated, there is a high number of buildings. There's a high percentage of building stock, derelict, abandoned, which are losing their value regardless of efforts made by distinguished architects and town planners, urban designers. You at the ministry have received a draft bill pertaining to this precious building stock. And I know that this happened many months ago, several months ago, and I know that you personally are interested in promoting this project, but I'm wondering why this draft law has not been approved as yet. We will see the utilization of this building stock. Can you tell us why we could finally find a solution? Well, allow me to say, first and foremost, that I am not a politician, but I know very well that approving a draft bill is not a piece of cake. And it entails a series of elements. First of all, many things matter, as, for example, the series of draft bills to be approved, even when it comes to the very same ministry. As you said, as you rightly pointed out, this draft bill is already finalized thanks to the contribution of the municipality of Athens and the research project implemented by your friend Fotopoulos. And it is characterized by an innovative spirit when it comes to the Greek standards pertaining to property, etc. So it is ready. It was ready already in December. I'm not sure, but I believe that it will be presented before the cabinet, the minister's cabinet, in March, and this will be followed by a round of consultation. And there are two groups. First, the abandoned buildings, brownfield, and how we can take care of their recovery. And this has to do with the buildings protected by Ministry of Culture or Ministry of the Environment, and on the other hand, some abandoned buildings, in some cases derelict, which need to be demolished because they are dangerous for public safety. In Larissa, recently we have read about a tragic event. And the second part has to do with urban regeneration. Again, this is job done by the previous government. I can remember that we cooperated with Mrs. Evangelidou, with the then competent authorities. So in order to say whose merit this is the merit of the previous government, but we have revisited and updated that, and now we are ready to proceed. So I do have a doubt whether it will be presented before the cabinet of March or April, etc. But I'm not the minister. I don't know exactly when this will happen, but I am confident that this will will shortly happen. Thank you very much. I saw a raised hand. So first the gentleman here and then the gentleman back there, excuse me. Good afternoon to all. My name is Panos Nikolotsopoulos. I live in Neapoli, in Exarchia. Now, unfortunately, the question I wanted to raise on abandoned buildings has already been answered. Allow me just to add that there are more than 2,500 buildings in the center of Athens, and it would really be it is critical, vital for some of these buildings that are of extreme beauty and architectural style to be refurbished. I repeat, I am an inhabitant of the center of Athens. I live in the center of Athens. I am too much concerned of the situation, but I am confident that if these buildings are refurbished and renewed, I have no doubt whatsoever that our city will become more beautiful. And well, allow me to say also this, because someone talked about Airbnb. We should not undervalue Airbnb. There are several abandoned buildings in the center of Athens, and of course I'm not arguing that Airbnb is a panacea, but certainly this Airbnb and similar endeavors may be very helpful to help recover the existing building stock. Mr. Roidis now has the floor.
Good afternoon. Tassos Roidis is my name. Architect, scientific partner of Munich University. In the 80s, two things happened in Athens that changed it radically. The first was the panic that had prevailed for the preservation of many classical buildings. So it was then that they started recording these buildings in order to list them. And the second thing that happened in 1988, if I remember correctly, was a law that dictated the removal of land uses of the city in other places. This had, as a result, the change of uses in areas like Psyri, in Metaxourio, areas that haven't managed to find their pacing. So my question is related to the regulatory plan, of course, and to the mixed use that you are proposing, Mr. Mayor. Maybe we are still in a state of panic right now because truly Athens doesn't have sufficient green. If we want to have green spaces, but do we really have a more general strategy that may involve demolition of buildings, which, yes, are in the right direction, but is there a general plan that isn't the result of this state of panic, a plan that can make the most of the building stock and the public spaces? Is there such a plan that includes all the different proposals and views that exist right now? Obviously, there is a plan. I would refer you to the regulatory plan for the city. The problem, however, for many years now, is that we don't want to implement it. Earlier, Mr. Professor said what happened 200 years ago. You said how Otto asked Ludwig to send, Louis to send his personal architect, because there was a lot of resistance back then. But there is great resistance even now. There are many reactions. There are deep reactions and great resistance to these policies. So the question is, are we ready? Are we ready all of us who are here in this room, regardless of political affiliations and ideologies, are we prepared to unite in order to give the battle for the future of the city? Because what is needed is, of course, to have the social alliance that will ensure good result. Please be brief, and please questions, not statements. What I didn't get from the debate until now is the following. We heard different views, different interventions. However, we don't know which are the priorities. We heard about specific measures, about Ellinikon, Eleonas. We heard that some people are planning, others are building. But I don't know which are the objectives. I haven't understood which are these objectives being a civil engineer. Maybe someone else may have understood. Someone said that there has been a decrease of population of 40%. This is not an objective. This is a verification of what happened. So the objective is which? Do we want to bring these people back? What do we want to do? Do we want to allow mothers to be able to walk along with the babies and children freely around the city, a city that is conquered by obstacles? So what do we really want to achieve? What are the objectives? We heard about the Green Fund that has as a role to get the revenues from the illegal buildings in order to channel them in society and improve the daily life of the citizens. Okay, what is your question? Okay, the question is, has the municipality thought about asking for more money about this type of actions? What has happened with the expropriations of properties? I believe that there are over 2,000 properties since the Bay mayorship that haven't been expropriated. They are still pending. I don't know which are the objectives. We don't know which are the objectives. Is it the reduction of the plot ratio? This is something that we have been talking about for so many years now. Now, the plot ratio or the coverage ratio. Are we really interested in this? How can we reach our objectives? We haven't done any discussion about that. I talked about 3 axes. The first axis with regard to the liberation of public space. The second one, mobility, sustainable mobility. And the third, mixed uses. Then I talked about 2 levels of implementation of the public policy. The first level being the daily life, to which you referred a little bit earlier. Playgrounds, pavements, cleanliness, lighting, all of these are the priorities. And I can give you specific examples of what we are currently doing for this and, of course, what we are planning to do in the future. And there is a second level, which is the level of the transition, if you like, of the city to a superior level through large-scale works. This is the direction the municipality of Athens is following. It is effort that we are making at different fronts that aims at bringing the Athenians back to their city. Off microphone. Can I say something? Yes, Ms. Evangelidou. I would just like to say something to the mayor. Maybe he hasn't seen it, but the Green Fund has launched a call for redevelopments. So what does this Green Fund says through this call is that the Green Fund is setting priorities because maybe something that was approved in 1976 or 1980 is no longer needed. But that is why the Green Fund now is aiming at prioritizing different actions. And it would be very useful for you if you took a look at that. And we say that no municipality gets money from the Green Fund for expropriations unless it has an integrated program. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Lazarou. I'm a student in the Aristotelian University of Salonika. First of all, I would like to say that we have enjoyed all the interventions. What we would like to see is a little bit more plans or designs or sketches of what you mentioned. I would like to pose a more romantic question. I believe that everything you said is indeed very important. All the actions that you have taken are very important. But I believe that if we want to make Athens a city where people will feel happy and free, then we should first and foremost take a look at the aesthetics of the public spaces. We talked about the front views of the block of houses. I personally believe that the classical story building, as we know it at least, the story building that prevailed after the war, is the basic cell of Athens and of Salonika and of all the big Greek cities. And I'm wondering whether there is someone who is actually thinking about the aesthetics and is not only focusing on practical issues like sustainable mobility or climate change. I'm wondering whether there is someone who is interested in aesthetics, and I would like to ask whether you believe that we can actually give a solution to this problem of aesthetics. I would like to add that there are cities in Europe where there is a specific color that people can use. In other words, you cannot use any color you want to paint the story building or your house. There is one color that you are obligated to use, and this ensures a beautiful aesthetic. Look, this is a very difficult issue to be resolved. In modern Athens, there are, under certain conditions, of course, certain councils that examine the issue of aesthetics, both for the new buildings, but also for old buildings that are about to be renovated. There are buildings also that are protected by the Ministry of Environment, by the Ministry of Culture, and there are also some administrative boundaries that need to be taken into account. Administrative boundaries that make compulsory the submission of an architectural proposal. This is a level that we could say ensures a certain level of control. Now, has it been successful? If we take a look at the buildings in Athens, we would say that no, it hasn't been so successful. At least this is what I would say. I'm not that satisfied. If we were talking about the morphological rule in Athens, I would say that it would be very difficult to be done because there are many particularities, both in the different blocks, but also in the urban development that has happened in over the years. And there are also different buildings of different time periods. Now, I don't know whether there is such a morphological rule. I don't know if there may be a proposal stemming from public dialogue. Maybe we could have a debate with the municipality and have such a rule.
Very briefly, there is a morphological rule. We have repeatedly talked about that. It is grey. Okay, it's many years since the block of flats have been painted, and so now there is the grey project. We finance up to 60% of the works that have to do with painting the facades of the buildings, and we are expecting great participation over the next months. Allow me also to add that it's 100 years ago there was an aesthetics committee in Athens. and it was up to that committee to control and to check and verify the aesthetic result of the blocks of flats in Athens back then. Now, having said that, I would suggest that we wrapped up because I know that it is too tiring for most of us. Now, there seem to be some comments off microphone. Well, I can only see one hand raised, but this will be our last question, really the very last. Thank you. Yannis Tekouras, good afternoon. I am about to take my degree from the Faculty of Architecture at the National Technical University of Athens. Now, when it comes to public debate, we usually have recourse to the scholars, scientists, etc., and experts, etc. But in our field, I regret to say that what I can see is a contempt vis-à-vis our sciences. In the case of the Omonia Square, for example, the project is to be implemented without the intervention whatsoever of any architect, and this is very important. It needs to be underlined. Again, in 2014, if I remember well, the Think Athens was not approved by the European Commission for financing because it was considered by the European Commission as a purely landscaping works. Third, the park in the case of the creation of the park in Daphnis is contrary to the existing regulatory master plan of Athens when it comes to the buildings that will remain void in the center of Athens. Here again we have seen repeatedly in the past the result of the void on the buildings left void, as in the case of the Olympic Games. Do you have a question to ask, sir, just to be concise? Yes, certainly. I would like to know what the opinion is of the scientists and the experts and the politicians alike when it comes to the contempt shown to the to our disciplines. Well, I cannot agree, of course, with the gentleman, especially over the past decades. We have seen the following. With regards to the role of Greek architects and the Greek urban designers, when it comes to the Rethink Athens, if I'm not wrong, there were 250 participations in the tender back then, which was sizable. In the case of the fact that there has not been a study to date certainly has led to the lack of acknowledgement of the role. Although so many architects have participated, awarded architects, now we end up seeing this project being implemented without taking into consideration the tenders, and so the municipality needs to explain why. Now, in 2019, the second tender that took place, the second initiative, attracted the participation of just 15 dossiers, so candidate architects. So 10 years ago, we had 250 architects wanting to participate, and these have just been disregarded, have been neglected, and now the project is being implemented without the real participation of architects. 10 years later, only 15 architects participating. I know that the municipality of Athens has announced a tender that will take place with regards to the Academia Platonos or the Giacumacatos works, etc. But we need to be frank in saying that the municipality goes on disregarding the real professional groups and the scientific groups that need to be involved. And this will certainly give rise to deleterious effects. Now, you have the floor, Mayor. Now, I thank you. I have to say that the municipality of Athens is privileged enough to work with distinguished experts, architects, town planners, economic analysts, and many of whom are here. And I would kindly ask you to abstain from devaluing your peers. So I'm here and I can accept good faith criticism, but we need to be just. Now, the project in Syntagma Square and the project in Platia Theatru, in Amalias Avenue, as I said, are being implemented on the basis of studies carried out many years ago that we have just updated, and they are being implemented by the architects that conceived them. This has nothing to do with Rethink. Rethink, which was thinking of the tramway and the single lane circulation, has nothing to do with what we are trying to do now. What we are trying to do and is features many scholars and scientists, as for example Mrs. Pangalou, the Academia Platonos and the Strefi Hill related project are being implemented by distinguished architects and scientists. And besides, we have already published the tender for the area around Monastiraki Square. The architectural tender, you rightly pointed out, for the city of Athens will follow. And then we will have another 6 or 7 architectural tenders for each and every square where the subway station are located, because these are, of course, milestones of the city, and so we want more in those specific flagship locations. And so whenever we have to do something really important, we activate and mobilize the experts, architects and others, of course, with full transparency. Thank you very much, Mayor. Architectural tenders guarantee the best possible result. This is why it's common practice around the globe. But you know what? They also entail that the study awarded being selected as the one that will be implemented, because this is the only way to guarantee an identity. What has not been, what cannot be certainly deemed acceptable is to award a study and then not select another architect to do the job. We need to know what the end of the what the virtues and the defects and shortcomings are of each specific architectural works. We have specific important projects, as the Athens Concert Hall, for example, such a significant building with a known architect, by a known, which, for example, needs to give and it needs to be acknowledged, especially when it comes to the subway stations. Of course, we welcome these news. We were not familiar with that, so thank you for letting us know. And having said that, I believe that it's high time we wrapped up, because it's this discussion has lasted approximately 3 hours. If we certainly we can all accept that after this debate, these are multifaceted, complicated issues that require complex and comprehensive solutions that need to involve us all, politicians, experts, professionals, scientists, and the citizens, of course. Thank you very much all for being here.
Το πάνελ. Να τις βγάλουμε.